This broadcast of E30 Racing is proudly brought to you by Bimmers Magazine for Bimmers enthusiasts worldwide and Eisman Australia, driven by sound. Taking a look at some Race 1 highlights now from the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup event here at Phillip Island. Joining me is Dave Stillwell in commentary. They're away for Race 1 of the weekend. A pretty good one.
Very much so. Sean Bell with a good jump from pole position, but look at Jeff Bowles rocketing through from the third row of the grid, making a great start and running, tucking just in behind Brian Burke there in the 27 Transrock car.
Now it's going to be tricky conditions for these guys as we've got a little bit of rain move through across the circuit just before this race started, so it'll be a little bit wet offline. It's going to be interesting for the guys to try to get their lines and find their way past each other after qualifying in fairly dry conditions.
Absolutely. We've just jumped on board now with Glenn Potter in the number 66 Jägermeister liveried car. A number of cars running Group A inspired liveries to correspond with the invited Group A E30 M3 of Bill Cutler also in the field. Some really hard racing on the opening lap as they run down through Stoner Curve.
Battle there between the guys. You can see that water out wide though as they run through Stoner Curve and down towards MG for the first time. Stretching out at the front. Bell's trying to pull away from the rest of the field here. He's a little bit twitchy out of the corner, but getting the power down quite nicely for this weekend of racing. Proudly brought to you by Bimmers Magazine and Eisman Australia. Those guys jumping on board. It's good to see a pretty strong field here this weekend.
Absolutely. One of the biggest fields we've seen in the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup in quite a few seasons. Obviously being the 100th anniversary of BMW as a brand and also the 100th round of E30 racing cars certainly made it an opportunity not to be missed by a number of racers.
At the moment we are on board coming down the hill with Glenn Potter. He's trying to put some pressure on the back of Christopher Bell. That battle pack though, look at them, they're all overtaking each other. Everybody just grabbing an opportunity to make a pass and just shove it down the inside. Well,
these are the conditions where it often comes back to driver skill as opposed to outright horsepower or handling ability. As we see Glenn Potter battling through the Siberia curve there on the run back up through the rear half of the circuit. The car's able to run side by side, but those tricky damp and drying conditions, very difficult to set the car up for. If it was going to be completely wet or completely dry, much easier to set the car up for than if it's damp and it's drying in this patch and it's wet in that patch. So a lot of adjustability available in E30 racing car. As we're seeing Brian Burke now apply the pressure to Jeff Bowles. So Brian looks like he's got a bit of speed here.
He's really come on strong in the back half of this race. We're getting towards the end of it with these highlights, but he's found some pace, and after starting right up the front, on the front row of the grid actually, he's really moved his, gone backwards, but now moving his way back forward after he's got into a bit of a rhythm.
Yeah, it looks like Sean Bell has cleared out in front in the number 100 entry, but Brian Burke around the outside. You don't see that very often at the best of times, at least not when the circuit is covered in a mild sprinkling of water. But Brian Burke, currently the fastest person on the racetrack, bit of an opposite lock correction. And as we see, already now with a half second or so gap over Jeff Bowles as they string through turn 12 onto the Gardner Straight.
Yeah, coming towards the finish line now at the end of this race, and you can see he just managed to get that job done right towards the end of the race and coming across to retrieve a second place out of that one. That's a good effort.
That is a seriously good effort, but Sean Bell was the absolute class of the field. Out in front, big gap, able to manage it, could back it off, didn't have to stress the car at all. Brian Burke, really good speed to overtake Jeff Bowles, but the rest of the field was having much closer racing.
Sunday morning here at Phillip Island. It's even colder than yesterday, if you can believe that. But anyway, now we're with Tim Freeman. The guys are saying the Rainmaster. Would that be right, Tim?
I'm not sure about that. Just maybe a bit of luck as well along the way. But a couple of cars ahead of me went off and otherwise managed to keep it on in the slippery conditions. So went well.
Have a good run. Good on you.
The rain holds off. And thanks to Q1 Group and Pelican Parts for sponsoring the championship, and to Bimmers Magazine
Listen to this.
and
Keep going.
Eisenman Australia for the broadcast sponsorship for this weekend. We couldn't do it without you, so it's great.
Back for race 2 here of the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup 100th anniversary event at Phillip Island. Great conditions on Sunday morning. Luckily the rain has gone away. We're seeing it on the radar though, so we might see something for the final endurance race in the afternoon. But coming down towards turn 1 at the moment, there's a battle on for the lead, and it looks like Burke's going to get there. He does. He sweeps across into the lead for the start of this race. Pretty good start from him. Picked up where he left off in race 1.
Absolutely there, Daniel. Had lots of speed towards the end of race 1, which was held in damp and tricky conditions yesterday afternoon. But at the start of this race, it's Brian Burke with the early pace. Bill Cutler now on slicks in the invited E30 M3 from the Group A period. But look at the hard racing. Caesars versus Freeman, Potter, and Chris Bell also tucked in there behind.
The mid-pack is really where we've been looking for great racing all weekend, hasn't it? These guys are really close to each other, and that shows in a bit of the Constructors' Championship between these guys as well.
Absolutely. Pelican Parts on board this year, your number one online destination for BMW parts direct from the US, supporting the Constructors' Championship. Quite a number of different tuning shops and motorsport preparation outfits support the races in the BMW Drivers' Cup. Of course, itself presented by Q1 Group. So we've got a number of cars presented alongside the Bell Motorsport Garage, Northern BM, David Levy Motorsport, along with some of the Canberra-based E30 races as well.
Back at the front, it's on here at the moment. Bell is not happy to be in second place. I think he feels he's got the speed and could really get through and push away like we saw in race 1. He's being held up at the moment and coming under pressure as well from a couple of cars behind him.
Well, that's always the story in the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup. If you can get out ahead early and manage a gap, you tend to have the race all to yourself. But if you get sucked into a battle with a car behind you, you'll really struggle to make pace back up to the car in front. Jeff Bowles, of course, applying that pressure to the rear of Sean Bell's number 100 Bell Motorsport car.
He's doing a good job and trying to stay right with him as they come onto the straight for the first time. Here's where Bell's going to try to get into the draft and see if he can slipstream his way past. Pulling up now behind. You can see the Q1 Group logo quite nicely on the rear bumper there as he pulls out of the draft. He's got a good read. And he should be able to, look at him up against the rev limiter down into 1.
Now that's one of those shift lights used by a number of competitors in the series. A really great Australian product, able to tap that into the loom off the tachometer at the rear of the dash cluster. As we see a large number of lines being used through turn 2 Southern Loop, or should we say Southern BM Loop, of course, providing the Eisenman exhausts in the Australian marketplace. Brian Burke trying to hold on. Now here we're on board with Peter Glusky. Whoa!
That's, interesting.
That looks like Jess Bell trying to take some lessons from Doc Newman from the movie Cars there. If you're turning hard enough left, you'll find yourself turning right.
Well, she's tried it, and she has exited stage right. And
Speedy Gonzalez exits stage right. So Potter on the back of Bowles now. So Potter much stronger in these dry conditions than we saw in the wet weather yesterday. He's got Steve Caesars tucked in behind. Good to have Steve Caesars back in the category in his red sedan after a couple of years away, after a massive roll at the end of 2013 at Winton.
The other man showing some pace there is Kody Cruz, who's coming back through the field after a bit of a slow start to the weekend with that race 1 wet weather. He's really finding his strength in the dry here this Sunday morning.
Yeah, Cruz Cody driving the car, prepared by Brad Robwell there, the category's eligibility officer. Really well presented car, but Cruz not a full-time racer in the category. That's gone horribly wrong. That's Andrew Larkin using too much of the exit at turn 12 and knocking both the left and right hand, both the right hand front and rear of that car. He's definitely going to need to spend some money with his dry cleaner and buy some fresh underpants after that one, as Jeff Bowles ranges up on the outside of Glenn Potter. They'll try to run side by side on the way down into Honda.
4 wide.
They'll go 2 wide, but Potter hangs tough on the outside.
And he's made it work as well as they come to the back section of the circuit. So good driving from those guys not to touch.
And there's Cruz Cody tucked in behind. He's obviously frustrated. He's got the speed and wants to get past. I think the same could be said for Steve Caesars behind. So a really good battle pack of 4 cars there. As we see, this is obviously a lap later where Potter and Cody have cleared Jeff Bowles and Steve Caesars there. And the Jägermeister car starting to make some ground on the number 27 Transrock car, but it's 2 from 2 for the number 100, the Sean Bell in the Bell Motorsport entry, taking out race 2 of the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup 100th year celebration at Phillip Island.
Proudly brought to you by Bimmers Magazine and Ironman Australia as well.
Well, it was Sean Bell taking race 2 win to back up his race 1 win yesterday. So that's 2 wins to the number 100 car. Brian Burke again in second. Glenn Potter charging through from the rear of grid in third. Cruz Kody in fourth. Jeff Bowles sidled down to P5. P6 was Steve Caesars. 7, John Angelella from P8, Chris Bell, Timothy Freeman, and Jess Bell, the third of the Bells, rounding out the top 10.
This is Jess Bell, who is not quite as quick as her brothers. Why not?
I'm quicker than Grid. I qualified in front, 1 spot in front of him yesterday.
Yeah, but he's hopeless. But not as good as Sean.
No, I think he's got a few more years of experience on me.
Can't blame experience on everything.
That's what I'm going to have to blame it on.
Okay. So how have you actually been going? What like position-wise this weekend?
I've been mid-pack all weekend. I was doing really well in this morning's race, but decided to spin at turn 2 and ruined it for myself. But I wasn't spun for too long. There was yellows coming onto the straight because Andrew decided to put himself into the wall.
And how will the 100k race go?
Hopefully good. I need to get in front of some boys.
Good point. Okay, Jess, you have a good run, okay?
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup 100-kilometre endurance race here to round out a very special weekend brought to you by Bimmers Magazine and Ironman Australia. Rain is on the radar, though. You can see it there on the windscreen as they launch away from the line for this, what's going to be a pretty big race.
That's correct, Dan. The longest race, apart from our 1-hour endurance races we've run, the longest solo driver races we've ever run in the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup. As around the outside, hanging tough goes John Angelella. That's normally a move we'd see reserved for the likes of Glenn Potter from his Speedway days. He's looking to dice it up with Cruz Kody, who's currently in 4th place. Jeff Bowles hanging up the pair of them. And once again, it's Sean Bell and Brian Burke out the front.
I thought Potter was going to go back to his Speedway days there. The road runs out very quickly on the Exeter Loop if you find yourself hanging around the outside, but he's managed to tuck himself just into 4th place now as they run down towards MG for the first time. These guys, it's not going to be an easy race for them this afternoon, is it? We know the weather's coming, it's going to get bad, so you just got to try to settle in and hope you can ride it out.
Well, that's the advantage that the E30 racing cars will have in this field, is they're running on a semi-slick tyre supplied by Yokohama, the Advan A050. Now we're going on board with Bill Cutler in the E30 M3 Group A. This is a genuine BMW Motorsport car run by Schnitzer. Won the Silverstone Tourist Trophy race in 1987, so beautifully restored back to its original 1987 specification. He has the choice of running either slick tyres or full wet tyres. Now they've gone out on slicks in the hopes that it'll stay dry for a bit. They do have the ability to do a pit stop, but looking at my phone, the radar doesn't look very encouraging. I think Bill might be making a trip down the pit lane here at the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit, as up the inside goes Chris Bell on Glenn Potter. That's on the move. Down into Honda hairpin, back down 2 gears in the close ratio 5-speed gearbox.
Around the outside.
Once again, we're seeing John Angelella on his return to the category.
He's making a great run.
He's absolutely dicing it up with the series regulars.
And he's now down the inside at Siberia, so that's the lines come back towards him. And now through the back section of the circuit past Hayshed, they've all got back in line because it's going to start to get very greasy out the back there. It's a tricky part of the circuit to try to come through in the wet, and you've just got to try to hold your line at this stage. You can see as we go on board with Potter down into MG now, he has got a lot of rain on the windscreen. I wouldn't be surprised if he flicks the wipers on in a second as this battle goes on in front of him.
As said, it'll be interesting to find out from the drivers after this race whether some of them opted for a dry setup, a wet setup, or a compromise, because the drivers who went for a full wet setup won't quite have the speed at the start of this race. But if it gets wetter as we expect the drivers who've compromised and gone for a full wet setup, like it looks like Cruz Kody's got a lot more speed there through too, as he's chasing down Sean Bell at the front of the field, wipers ablaze on the number 39 car.
He's pulled away from Brian Burke quite easily, who we see there in the middle of the shot. We're on board with him now as we come around Stoner Curve. You can just see he pulled away quite easily in the Southern Loop a bit of a slower corner, but in the higher speed stuff he's had to ease off a bit, and he's coming back to these 2 cars behind him. But Sean Bell is not going to have it all his own way here, I wouldn't expect.
Well, we did see in the first race yesterday, where it was dry and wet at the same time, that Brian Burke at the same time. I could tell you about experiences on a Friday night like that. But Cruz Kody was one of the quick guys, but Brian Burke was the quickest in the damp conditions. As we see Bill Cutler struggling on slicks, as we start to see some of the spray come up from the cars.
Watch the straight line speed though, he'll go past Potter here easily. There you go.
That's a 300 plus horsepower, 2.3 litre 4-cylinder. Prepared just exactingly as it was back in 1987 running through there.
Sometimes it's nice to have that horsepower advantage, isn't it? As we go down yet again to Honda corner, and side by side, not going to make it work there. It's very greasy through that corner at the minute. Of course, a lot of the weather, if you don't know Phillip Island, does come up off the straight just behind them and straight up off the water above the cliff tops and dumps into that corner first.
Absolutely. As Barry Sheen used to say, it's a gateway to hypothermia. I'll have to excuse my voice at the moment. Running on about 4.5 out of 6 cylinders. I reckon I've got a dodgy plug and a blocked injector plugging my vocal cords at the moment. But Barry Sheen, of course, was a renowned commentator for some of the racing down here at Phillip Island. Didn't much like getting stuck out in the weather without a jacket. Very glad to be in the nice warm commentary box this afternoon.
You might have to get onto Pelican Parts to try to get some restoration happening.
Might need to get on Pelican Parts. Maybe get some merchandise thrown in, of course. Pelican Parts on board supporting the Constructors' Championship in the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup. That championship being led by Bell Motorsport at the moment for precisely this reason. Sean Bell out the front in the number 100, but as we were saying earlier, doesn't have all its own way. Lights ablaze on the number 39 entry of Cruz Kody there. He's cruising up, ranging up on the outside on the approach to Hayshed.
He's just got so much more pace at the moment, doesn't he? As it gets greasy, he's been able to haul in Bell in front, and now he's going to the outside here. This is a big move to try to make it work, and wow, it's made it look easy.
Well, that's number 39 moving into P1. Number 100, that's one of the few times that Sean Bell's been off the front of the race. And as you see, that move done, and it's bucketing down with rain here. So a huge amount of weather rolling in off Bass Strait onto Phillip Island. Unprotected by any natural land barrier or any hills. The weather can be beautiful, but it can be terrible, and it's just gone that way.
You'd have to say now we're going to get some excitement in this event, proudly supported by Bimmers Magazine and Eisman Australia. These guys are going to be struggling to keep it on the island now, and anybody who gambled on that dry setup, I don't think they should be going and buying a lottery ticket after that picking performance.
Well, this is the advantage for the E30 racing car runners, is because they're running a treaded R compound or semi-slick tyre, as you will. You run the same tyre in the wet or in the dry. Although I did see a number of nervous faces looking at their phones at the radar, making some quick trips to the Yokohama truck to purchase a brand new set of Advan AO50s to make sure they'd have full tread depth tyres available in case the weather came down. This is the other story.
There we go.
Is the invited E30 M3 Group A car of Bill Cutler is changing off the full slicks onto the full wets. Well, that's the quickest pit stop I've ever seen for one of those cars.
I think there's some great editing there for the highlights of that stop, because unfortunately he's spent a long time in the pits and he's gone a couple of laps down because of it.
6 minutes. Speaking of someone who's had some terrible luck, that's Tim Freeman, the marketing officer of the category. He's decided to park himself on the exit of turn 11 there. Now, normally that is a reasonable viewing spot, but I don't think in a E30 racing car with steamed up windows, Tim's going to enjoy that view very much. He's down actually in a ditch. It'll be quite hard as we see some replay footage.
Caught the cameraman out there in this pouring weather.
And look at the rear wheel spinning. Absolutely no traction off the exit of turn 11 there. It's in a safe enough spot. The official will probably leave that one there till the end of the race.
It's probably time for him to crack open Facebook Live and do a bit of a marketing survey of how much you're enjoying the Q1 group at the moment.
Well, kids, this is a perfect example. If you do need to text while driving, make sure you pull over in a safe position.
Huge moment for Bell.
That's Jess Bell. That's the second big moment we've seen after that near off in race 2 at turn 2. That's not how you get around the Hayshed in Speedy Gonzalez, the green Hornet there.
No,
and Jess Bell proving that once bitten, twice shy.
She's going to find herself in a situation like Tim Freeman here. She will not be able to get that car out of there very quickly. Got to keep the boot into it, keep it revving, and just see if she can pluck a gear and drive it out. But it's going to be a long time in this rain.
As we go back to the front.
They're all going off. That's the other Bell. He's gone. Sean Bell completely off the track at Casey Stoner Curve. I know in motorbike racing and MotoGP they talk about backing it in, but that was probably a bit crazy.
And as he gave it the gas to try to get out of there, the rear end of the car sinking through, trying to dig its way into the centre of the earth. This just unleashes Kody to just cruise home, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Jess Bell managing to get that car back out again. The great thing about having that much water on the circuit is that after a few laps, it'll wash away all that residue and all of that evidence that an off-track excursion was undertaken by the Bell Motorsport racer.
She'll be able to claim, if nobody in the pit lane saw her, that she didn't have an off-track excursion, but unfortunately with the cameras here this weekend capturing everything, she's going to have to try to explain that one later on.
I think she definitely is. Great to have Jess on board. She definitely brings some colour to the field, and having Speedy Gonzalez in it's nice to have a green car breaking up the all-white or the all-blue cars that we've had before. Brian Burke there putting the move on Steve Caesars.
That's putting him a lap down, I think.
As we see Brian still holding down second from the third place Jeff Bowles. That's Steve Caesars as it is going down a lap.
Yeah,
so Sean Bell hopefully able to recover that car from where he was parked. As we see, this is what happens once you've got proper wet tyres on the car. You get a surplus of grip as
rain. It's just damaging everything out there.
Glenn Potter would be looking at the rain if he could see out of the side windows. Yeah. Indeed, if he could see out of the windscreen of the number 66 Jägermeister livery car. He's trying to drive hard on the wheel, short shifting to stop the wheel spin in the rear axle from exciting the car sideways in an oversteer movement. Very hard on the wheel, definitely driving like a speedway car, as we see.
To his inside.
At least I think that's Cutler.
I'm sure I saw a light somewhere in there.
If we go to the outside shot, we'll see that, and you'll see the very large plumes of spray come off the back of Cutler's car. Those full wet tyres digging nicely through the standing water on the circuit, comfortably 10 seconds a lap faster than any of the racers out there at the moment.
The problem is he's dropped so much time on everybody else that he's way down this field. So we're staying on board with Potter here because we'll have a look at what the conditions are like in this 100k endurance race, proudly presented by Bimmers Magazine and Eisman Australia this weekend. Just atrocious conditions, and it's interesting to see he might need to adjust his wipers at the end of this one as well and try to change the settings up a little bit there.
Well, the cars do run the original wiper system, so you've got an intermittent, slow and fast setup. I think Glenn might need to duck down to, or maybe call Pelican Parts up
there we go.
and get a couple of 500mm or 24-inch wiper blades sent out, because it looks like those ones aren't quite sticking to the screen effectively.
As he comes down, I think this is Casey State of the curve. We've been through Southern Loop. There's so much spray in front. You just see how difficult it is for the drivers, and oh, look at that. Under brakes, the car twitching away from him. So they're doing a pretty impressive job just to keep these cars on the island. Oh, no, that's a different car that's emerged in front of him now. I think, which car is that? That's Christopher Bell.
I think that is Chris Bell in the Bell Motorsport car. But to give you an indication of how slow the cars are going, normally at the approach to Honda hairpin, you're in fifth gear approaching 200 kilometres an hour. Glenn Potter hadn't even gotten out of fourth gear yet, so probably only somewhere in the vicinity of 160, 165 k's an hour. Shifts up to fourth gear now on the exit of Siberia. Probably not flat through Hayshed today.
No.
Look at that stream of water spraying off the back of the number 29 car there for Bell.
Oh,
once again,
switch for Potter.
Wiggling under brakes on the approach to Lukey Heights. Normally a corner that in your car you can feather the throttle and carry a huge amount of speed as the car loads sideways. Definitely not those conditions this afternoon.
And it's just not easing up for these guys as we come towards the end of this race. Potter just sitting in behind at the moment. You can see from the outside, it actually, in many regards, the outside looks a bit nicer for visibility, but it's definitely not nicer for feeling the car moving under you, as here's Kody coming around now across the top of Lukey Heights. He's on his final lap. He's made it look easy after taking the lead at about the midpoint of the race, and he's just never looked back.
Well, after Sean Bell fell off at Stoner Curve, Cody's maintained a massive gap to the second place runner. He'll be very, very happy with that. Oh, look at that. He is absolutely wrapped to take out the inaugural 100k race for the Q1 Group BMW Drivers' Cup. It's a sensational performance for the Phillip Island native. Normally spends most of his time working at the go-kart circuit at the Phillip Island Grand Prix circuit. So those are some laps that have really helped out this afternoon.
They certainly have. Cruz Kody leading home Brian Burke, Jeffrey Bowles, Sean Bell and John Angelella. After the race, Phil Brock caught up with Cruz Kody to get his thoughts on the race weekend.
The winner of the 100k race, the final, the main race for the E30s, and it's Cruz Kody. I reckon you would have enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was really good. Those first couple laps when it was dry, I tried to make the most of what the conditions were, and it slowly dropped off, and all of us were all over the shop, and we put new tyres on for that race, and yeah, it paid off.
Well done, Cruz.
Thanks, mate. First ever race win in a race car. So I used to do karts,
Oh, good
so
on you.
first ever one.
Fantastic.
So.
Yeah.